Welcome to part 5 of the V Armory tutorial series. In this one we're going to add the remaining firearm parts needed to get the weapon firing and fully functional. So we're going to start with the muzzle, create an empty game object, name it Muzzle, M-U-Z-Z-L-E. Make sure it's spelled correctly, capital M or lowercase m does not matter. So we're going to position the muzzle a little bit in front of the barrel of the gun, right about there. Next you're going to select the safety switch mesh and add a fire selector component. We're going to increase the size of available fire modes and available the fire selector rotations to 3. Element 1 should be full and element 2 should be semi. So on safety we can see the rotation is -90 on X, and it's 10 degrees for every respective fire mode, so -80 and -70 for full and semi-auto. And you can set the touchpad direction to left, right, up, down, center. I like to put it where the fire selector is relative to the gun. For the AKM it's on the right side. Next select the trigger mesh and add a trigger component. So trigger and release and trigger pull are on a scale of 0 to 1, 0 being the trigger completely released and 1 being it completely pulled back. So you have to pull the trigger 90% of the way before the weapon will fire, and then you have to release the trigger to at least 20% before pulling it back to 90 will fire the weapon again. If that doesn't make sense, play around with these values and just see what happens with the weapon behavior. So next we need to set up pose type, pose axis, and pose input scale. So pose type for this will be rotation, because the trigger will rotate and it rotates around the x-axis. So it starts at -90, and if we rotate the trigger back to its pulled position, it's at -70. That's a difference of 20 degrees. So that's your pose input scale. And now your trigger's set up. The last thing we need to add is a chamber. Create an empty game object and rename it chamber. Add a chamber component. Set the bullet tag to cube pistol. You can set the eject force to about 5 and the eject torque to about 3. Don't worry about the chamber dot axis or bullet dot axis. That's just the axis that has to be aligned between the chamber and the bullet before the bullet will be loaded into the chamber. And if you want to load a bullet directly into a chamber, just add a sphere collider and make sure it's a trigger. So if you don't have an eject transform set up, the chamber will be used as the eject transform, and sometimes bullets will collide with the gun itself. It's not exactly what we want. So create an empty game object, name it eject, and move it a little bit outside of the gun. So the bullets will be positioned here when they are ejected from the gun. Okay, so next thing we need to do is make sure the chamber is in the right position. So drag a cube pistol bullet prefab onto the chamber. Make sure you have the chamber transform selected, and then move the chamber to where it should be. I'm not going to get too specific right now, but right about there is correct. And then you can delete the cube pistol bullet prefab. At this point you should have a fully functioning firearm. So if we press play, pick up the gun, load in the magazine, take it off safety, chamber around, and you can see that we're now firing the weapon, fully functional. That concludes the V Armory tutorial series for setting up a simple AK. Thanks for watching.